Good evening. Welcome to Business Live. In our headlines, economist Professor Peter Korte asks government to provide a detailed account of how the emission levy will be used.
One other point that government hasn't been very clear is what is going to use this money for. Oftentimes, you use emission taxes or pollution tax, etc., to change behavior, to affect lives. You want a clean environment, you want to tax people so you can make things better. Now, where are we channeling these monies into?
Government hints of plans to reintroduce the restrictions bill to Parliament in due time to protect local manufacturers from the influx of cheap imported goods into the country. We will be discussing.
I've not aborted it. Doc, I assure you, I think it's very important that we get some of this LI going through so that we ensure that it's cut to the bone, to the marrow.
You do want to stay for the details right after this break. Welcome. I am Emma Davis. Let's dive in. The Minister of Trade and Industry, Katie Hammond, has disclosed that government will reintroduce the restrictions bill to Parliament in due time. According to him, the legislative instrument, which faced opposition from traders and importers and was subsequently withdrawn, has not been abandoned. He assured that the bill will return to Parliament to ensure the protection of local manufacturers against cheap imported goods. Mr. Hammond spoke at the 30th anniversary of Rose Aluminium Company and the 65th birthday of the founder of the company.
In the end, I was actually going to lay. I would have laid it. A few things transpired. We would explain. It's not public yet. A few things came up, and so it's actually being held in abeyance. But I've not aborted it. Doc, I assure you, I think it's very important that we get some of this LI going through so that we ensure that it's cut to the bone, to the marrow. Why do we allow foreigners to saturate our market with almost anything conceivable? I don't particularly buy into that. I have a mission to make sure that in the fullness of time, Ghana is able to develop from its own internal base. We'll talk about Malaysia. We'll talk about those other countries we've all come to hear about. Well, if they didn't take decisions, they didn't take measures, deliberate measures, to ensure that the economies were developed, they won't be who they are now. And why is it that Ghana would continue from the days of Goggisberg? I call it the Goggisberg economy. Why would we continuing to do the Goggisberg thing when we're now talking about massive industrial transformation and proper economic development? You don't do that when everything is important. I'm talking about rice.
Let's get on to Zoom and speak to managing partner at Yamson and Associates, Michael Harry Yamson, for some analysis on this development. Thank you, Mr. Yamson, for joining us. Are you worried that government is still planning to reintroduce the import restriction bill?
Well, thank you very much for having me on this evening. And I have to say that I am worried. And I'm worried because the statements that the minister makes, first of all, betray a scant regard for trade diplomacy. I think that as this particular discussion about the lane of an ally has gone on, what has been clear is that we don't appear to have really engaged with our trade partners, with WTO, with countries like China, from who we import 42% of all our imports. They would want to have a say because this is going to impact them. Remember that they are also financiers of our budget. They are also major creditors to us. And so we cannot take these actions purely on whims and caprices. There has to be a deeper conversation about what will work and how it will work in the best interest of Ghana. We can have the debate in our parliament on the basis of the minority will have their say and the majority will have their way, but we will have to face the real world also, where we have to be much more careful about the communication and the way in which we sell the agenda. And I'm not convinced that the minister is effectively doing that, bearing in mind that the whole world is listening. And when he speaks, he's speaking on behalf of the government of Ghana.
So in your view, what would be the impact? Because the trade minister seems convinced that something still has to be done to check the influx of some items that are being imported.
Well, let me give you just a few examples. In the rice sector, if we ban importation, we need to expand our production by 70% based on current consumption levels. For sugar, we need a 900% increase in production. For poultry, we need over 200% increase. For juices, we need over 100% increase. And in the famous Yemuadia, we need about a 300% plus increase. Now, any shortage in any of these items does not bode well for inflation. And we have just gone through a very painful period of high inflation in this country. So I dare say that given the levels of expansion in supply that we would have to satisfy in the very short term, I'm not very convinced that we have the capacity to implement this policy as currently envisaged. Now, your trade partners will react either through trade policy or diplomatic actions. And those will have dire consequences also for our trade balances. And that will also affect our currency stability. So I think that in terms of, to your question, the risks are quite simply too high unless we have gone through the process, as I've said, of a deeper local dialogue and international dialogue, and then made sure that our markets are capable of responding.
What policy would you look at, or would you suggest looking at the economy, or looking at an economy like ours?
Well, I mean, first of all, the issue for me is not that the domestication of our economy is bad. No, that is a good thing. But in pursuing that, we have to make sure that it is done in tandem with improvements in infrastructure, both the agricultural and agribusiness infrastructure, as well as the general economic infrastructure. We also have to think about what we do with the agriculture and agribusiness sector in terms of incentives and possibly subsidies to help boost supply. Then you also have to look at the issue of consumer preferences, because money will chase consumer preferences. So if we simply take out importation and we don't replace it with equivalent products made locally, made in Ghana, we're only going to stoke an illicit economy. That is also not good for us, because we all know it. Anytime you have a parallel economy, government policy will collapse, economic policy will collapse. And in the end, it is the ordinary Ghanaian worker, ordinary Ghanaian consumer that is going to suffer very, very heavy penalties for, the rather rash actions of government. Now, the third point also for me is that if we don't do all of this with a clear view on how we're going to manage the licenses, and for me, I'm against the license regime, simply because I feel that it is definitely going to stoke corruption. It is definitely going to stoke political patronage. And that is not what we need in our economy going now or going forward.
What then can be done to give the needed support to industries and manufacturing firms in Ghana today?
Well, I firmly believe that we need to reward investors. We need to take away the high taxes that we are putting on industry at the moment. We need to lower the high tariffs that industry have to pay. And in this matter, I'm talking about raw material imports and utilities specifically. I also think that we need to support the change in technology. We need to support off-grid, cleaner energy solutions and technologies that will boost our productivity as industry across Ghana. And certainly Ghana also needs to focus. We need to focus on which industries we are going to support in this drive towards domestication of the economy. And on that basis, move ahead in a very gradual, well-managed pace. The way we're going about it, in my view, is rather rushed. It hasn't looked broadly enough, or we have not had the opportunity to have a very deep conversation about what we want to do, what its implications are, how we will manage our partners, and indeed how we will respond as Ghanaian industry. I'm all for Ghanaian industry, but I think the minister's mission is without a strategy, and that is very dangerous for this economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yamson, for your time. Michael Harry Yamson is managing partner at Yamson and Associates. Moving on, the executive director of Rose Aluminium Company, Berima Osei-Bonsu, has underscored the need to grow Ghanaian aluminium firms to help create jobs. According to him, the industry can produce quality utensils in Ghana to be exported across the African continent to end the foreign exchange. There's more in this report.
Ghana's aluminium industry has gone through several phases. The industry is a capital-intensive one that requires a lot of financing. Currently, the industry is heavily populated with foreign companies. Speaking to Joy Business at the 30th anniversary of the company and the 65th birthday of the founder, Vivian Sewa Edu, Executive Director of Rose Aluminium, Berima Osei-Bonsu, said the aluminium industry could be a game changer for Ghana's economy.
Our contribution to the economy cannot be low. I mean, when it comes to like employment, we have about 50 workers who people depend on. We engage in like export activities, to our neighboring countries like Niger, like Togo, like Burkina, like Ivory Coast. So our contribution to the economy, like in our own small, we cannot be overlooked. I mean, even for the fact that an indigenous Ghanaian business is able to thrive for this long is something that the country should be proud of.
Rose Aluminium Company Limited is one of the oldest and leading aluminium companies in the West African sub-region, manufacturing premium aluminium hollowware from aluminium circles or discs. The founder, Vivian Sewa Edu, narrates part of the formative years of the company.
Amidst much opposition and resistance, Parkview was registered in May 1993, and exactly 3 years ago today, Thursday, 8 February 1994, our machines began to work at the first time on the premises that was at North Industrial Area in a quiet underground basement. The sound of those machines was music in my ears.
On his part, Minister for Trade and Industry, K.T. Hammond, assured captains of industry that import restrictions legislative instrument, which was withdrawn from Parliament, will be reintroduced.
In the end, I was actually going to lay. I would have laid it. A few things transpired. A few things came up. And so it's actually been held in abeyance, but I've not aborted it. Doc, I assure you, I think it's very important that we get some of this LI going through so that we ensure that it's cut to the bone, to the marrow. Why do we allow foreigners to saturate our market with almost anything conceivable?
The Association of Ghana Industries has indicated it will consider legal action to halt the implementation of the emissions levy. That's if government fails to back the implementation of the levy with scientific proof. The concern is coming at a time government is struggling to implement the levy, which will impose 100 cedis per ton of carbon dioxide. Dr. Humphrey Ayimdake is president of the association and has been speaking on PM Express Business Edition.
Seriously, for now, it hasn't taken off because the practicing note from the Ministry of Finance is not yet out. So even though the statement is out there on the factories, because you need to define a scientific way of measuring how the cement factories are doing the emission, how the chemical factories are doing the emission, for which cost you could compute. In the case of the cars, they use the capacity of each car, and therefore if you go, that can easily be computed. So that of the factories have not taken off. The practicing note is not yet out, and therefore there's no cause of alarm. Members of our association and members, they're out there, we're still engaging government, and we believe that we will engage.
How is this engagement going to go? Because for some other interest groups, they are pushing some of these taxes to be stalled. How is this engagement going to go when you engage government on this? Because some will say that, listen, you're already burdened. These other tax measures is going to compound your situation.
That's why I use the word. The practicing notes is the blueprint that defines how this said emission will be computed and programmed onto the software to the computer for purposes of
whichever way we'll look at it.
And once it is not ready, as long as they haven't figured it out,
what will be the level of engagement to ensure that this tax maybe doesn't take off?
And it's a science. It's not a matter of it being whether it's taken off. If you cannot justify it by a scientific measure, where your peers of other jurisdiction and of the same category will say your science of measuring your environmental emission within factories is standard, you cannot. If not, we take it to court and test the law. So for now, as long as we don't have the practicing notes, respectfully, Honorable Minister, we engage on all fronts with the best of heart. The practicing note is not out until...
You talked about the scientific nature of this,
of measuring of this. Yes.
If that is not established, is a legal route an option for you to consider?
Of course, because if it is not the case and you use arbitrariness, all right, and therefore if a cement factory producing presumably 50,000 metric tons a month or a day, and another producing same about 30,000, how do you measure the emission and therefore compute it? It's science. You must justify it.
Meanwhile, Director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, Professor Peter Korte, is asking government to outline and share how the levy will be used. Although government needs to shore up its revenue, Professor Korte believes the public needs a detailed account of what the taxes will be used for.
Already, the cost of doing business is high, and many firms are struggling to adjust to some of the new taxes and the new additional costs that are being imposed. So any new tax certainly has to be justified, because otherwise it becomes difficult to assimilate such cost in your, or incorporate such cost in your operations. And I think one other point that government hasn't been very clear is what is going to use this money for. Oftentimes you use emission taxes or pollution tax, etc., to change behavior, to affect lives. You want a clean environment, you want to tax people so you can make things better. Now, where are we channeling these monies into? Are we going to use it to perhaps even provide charging points for electric vehicles? Are we going to use it to clean the environment? Are we going to use it to halt galamsey? I mean, some of these things have to be made clear. Are we going to use it to even improve the working conditions of AGI and all the business community? So I believe there's a lot more that ought to be done in this. Yes, we all agree government needs to raise revenue because we need to show up our revenue GDP ratio. But let's not continue to overburden the already burdened taxpayer. There are other options by which you can raise revenue. Make the existing tax handles more efficient. You also have non-tax revenue. There are state-owned enterprises that are supposed to provide declared dividends for government. Some are not efficient and they are rather making losses and drawing on the kitty. So these are all things that one has to look into. And of course, government also cutting down its expenditure, looking at some areas where it needs to have value for money. Some of these things you need to engage. Apart from engaging, undertake some background research. Assess the acceptance of the such tax measures. You can sample some Ghanaians and find out how this will work. Sample the key stakeholders, find out how this will work, and then engage some of the key stakeholders as well. AGI and all that. Then you have a sense of how this is going to work and its acceptability. But if you don't, and you just throw in such new taxes, it will receive resistance. You saw e-levy, we saw VAT, we've seen other forms of taxes that have received a lot of resistance. Even the debt exchange program, you saw what we went through, very painful exercise with a lot of agitations, unrest, picketing. I think we need to move away from this quick fix approach.
You're still watching Business Live with me, Emma Davis. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more. I hope we've helped you make your budget ahead of the Valentine's Day. I am Emma Davis. For more business news, do log on to myjoyonline.com. Have a good evening.